Hi, I'm Joy Funnell, and today in this video I'm going to tell you a little bit about using your kiln and how to program it. I get quite a few people asking me, they've bought a new kiln, they're super excited about it, but they're also quite scared of it, and I understand that. This little thing is absolutely the metal clayer's best friend, whichever type of kiln you have. This is just the one that I'm going to use for an example today, but you need to become friends with it, and you need to not be scared of it and know how to use it. So I'm not going to be telling you how to fire lots of different metal clays and that sort of thing. I purely want to try and explain a little bit about the basics of using it and the basics of programming it. So to start off with, what are you going to put your kiln on? It's really important to think safety, safety, safety when you're using a kiln. It gets really hot, so don't forget that. When it's on, it gets super hot on the top here. It's going to get really hot on these sides and the back, and also on the door gets really hot, so it's important to only touch the handle on the door. What doesn't get hot is directly underneath it, because if it did, the heat went downwards, it would melt the controller and the wires. So if you think about it logically, it's not going to get hot underneath. That said, it is important to stand it on a heat-proof surface and to have a heat-proof surface in front of it, especially if you're going to be taking things in and out of the kiln while the kiln is running and hot. And as an enameller, I do that a lot, so I always have a nice area in front of it, and just for, you know, general safety's sake, I always make sure my heatproof extends underneath the kiln as well. Inside the kiln, I would always suggest that you do something on the floor of your kiln, because in these type of little muffle kilns, if you get bits falling onto the floor of the kiln or whatever, they can actually damage it, and you don't want that. You know, this little baby is a precious thing, and you want to be looking after it. So I use ceramic fibre sheet. This is a little bit don't do this at home. If you're going to use ceramic fibre, be very careful. Be careful of the dust from it and that. But this is a little bit of 3mm ceramic fibre sheet, often called ceramic fibre paper, just to confuse you. Even though that's not actually papery. And if you've been touching it, always wash your hands afterwards for the dust. You can either line it with something like that, or you can use what they call kiln wash that you buy from a glass firm, or, you know, anywhere that sells kilns probably has kiln wash, which is a special solution that you mix up and you paint the bottom of the kiln with it, and then it will protect the bottom of the kiln. And I do recommend that it's worth taking those steps and making sure the bottom of your kiln is protected before you start using it. For a lot of things with metal clay, you can use your kiln, you can put them into the kiln cold, and you can go back to cold again. So if you're worried about the heat, you don't necessarily have to be opening and shutting the door while the kiln is glowing and red hot. But there will be times when you might need to do that. For example, if you decide to do some enamelling at some point in time, or if you wanting to add gold using key and boo using the kiln, which I do quite a bit. So it's useful to know how to get things in and out your kiln while it's hot. There are various methods people use. My preferred go-to method always for putting things in and out of my kiln is to use a piece of ceramic fibre hard shelf, and also a wire mesh like this, which has got, like, it's a little shape with two little legs on each side. You know, the mesh is bent down, and the reason it's that shape is because I also use a firing fork. And a firing fork is, let me see if I can get that somewhere where you can see it, is a piece of wire in a wooden handle that comes into a U shape at the end, and that goes in underneath our mesh, which we can then pick up from a nice safe distance. And I'm holding a nice wooden handle which is good and insulated. If if anything should happen, it's a good safety thing. And then on top of that, whoops, don't do that. On top of that, I have my piece of ceramic board on the top, and I put my things to be fired on the top like that. And I'm just going to get up and show you. This allows me to go into the kiln, pop it in, put it down, and just make sure if I've gone into a hot kiln, I always put my firing fork back on the heat-proof surface. And then when I want to take my piece out again, if I'm enamelling, I can just go into a hot kiln, bring it out onto a heat-proof surface. That's my preferred method, and I also use that whenever I'm doing metal clay, open shelf firing metal clay. That is because I was enamelling long before I ever got into metal clay, so that's where I was coming from. What's important if you're not going to use that method is you don't want to be putting things directly on the floor of your kiln. So you want little kiln posts which are readily available, and you so for another method you can put these into the kiln, and I'm just going to pop 3 of these in because you don't necessarily need 4. That's fine. And again, a little bit of ceramic board, and you can use some kind of tongs or tweezers, something with a longish handle if you're going to be using it hot, and you can just go in and pick this up, the board, and pop it in and put it in on top of the little posts like that, so your piece is sitting up and away from the floor. And again, you can go in and just take it out. If I was taking it out hot, I'd probably have another set of little posts here that I could put it down onto, because I don't want to just put it down onto the board direct. I prefer to have a little air gap round underneath. So that's just basically setting up, getting yourself ready to go, and then after that, we need to start looking at the controller and everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on the controller so you can see it nice and clearly. And I'm going to try and put into simple words how to use the controller, because I know it is super confusing when you first buy a kiln and you read the handbook and you're like, oh my goodness, that absolute double Dutch. So I'm going to try and simplify that out for you a little bit so that you can program your own kiln really easily. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you about actually programming the kiln. Before I do that, I am going to do a quick bit of catching up from my last little section. A couple of things I realised I didn't mention that I really should have done, so I'm going to mention them now. Number 1, if you are going in and out of a kiln hot, putting pieces in and out, you may well want to wear heat-proof gloves. There's a lot of heat coming forward out of that kiln. It's your choice. Personally, I don't using my firing fork, but I would recommend that you do. Secondly, with the ceramic fibre board and sheet that I was showing you, whenever you're working with anything ceramic fibre, if you're cutting it up, always wear a mask. So just for moving the board around afterwards, that's not a problem. You don't need a mask for that. But if you're cutting it up, anything where you're getting dust up off it, use a mask as well when you're doing that. Okay, so now we're going to cover actually programming the kiln, and I am just going to cover this quite simply. My aim is to just try and make this a little more understandable, because it's a little bit difficult to get your head around to start with. But believe me, once you've got your head around it, actually it's super easy. It's just getting there. So on this little Pro 1 kiln that I'm going to show you, it's got a 3-button controller, and this works very, there's a lot of kilns that have very similar controllers. The Pro 7, Prometheus Pro 7 has this same controller, and quite a lot of other different makes of kilns all have controllers that work in a very similar way. I'm covering the basic function on how to program it. There will be more functions in your handbook, varying from kiln to kiln, that you can also use, but this is just to try and get you going with the basics. So first of all, we need to switch the kiln on. Some kilns switch on really nice and quietly. This particular kiln switches on extremely noisily. So I think it must be one of the noisiest kilns I've ever heard. So I get a really loud beeping noise off my little kiln. And when I switch it on, what comes up is the controller here, and it's showing me idle. At the present moment, it's not doing anything. It's idle. The kiln is idle. And it is showing 25, and that is the temperature inside the kiln at this precise moment. So basically more or less room temperature. Most kilns, in fact I think all kilns, will run in Fahrenheit or centigrade. The little dot here is lit. It says when lit C, which indicates that I am in centigrade. So at the present moment inside that kiln it is 25 degrees centigrade. We have the three buttons. This is increase and decrease are the two main functions for these two, and this one is our program start stop switch, and basically everything we tell the kiln to do we kind of press that afterwards and say okay, just to confirm the instruction that we're giving to the kiln all the while. This particular kiln will take 9 different programs, and for each program there are 5 segments. There you go, you're confused already, aren't you? So every program is basically a firing schedule that I can set up for whatever I want. And each segment inside that program is an instruction. So if I press this button again, it shows program 1. And from there I could carry on and start programming, which I'm going to. I'm just going to show you, if I keep pressing the up key on that, it's just going to run through telling me the number of programs I've got each time, with a nice little beep each time. And then it goes back to 1, which is the one I'm going to set up and show and try and explain. So program 1 will be a firing schedule. We're dealing with metal clay. You might in time deal with glass. It will be exactly the same thing. This is a firing schedule. This is putting my clay into the kiln from cold back to cold, or from unfired to fired. It's all in one program. Within that program I can give it 5 different instructions, 5 segments, and each one of those instructions could tell it to do something different in terms of adjusting its temperature and how fast to do it and how long to hold it for. But I don't have to use all 5 instructions in each program. I might have a simple program that's only 1 instruction. Don't worry, it'll get clearer. I know it's confusing. Okay, so program 1, I'm on program 1. Great. So next thing I'm going to do is say yes, I want to deal with program 1. So I say okay, and it comes up showing this little RA1. This is ramp 1. What on earth is ramp? Okay, ramp is the speed at which a kiln will go up, or to heat up or cool down. So for every thing that a kiln does, it's going to either be heating up or cooling down to get to a temperature that we want it to get to. We call this ramp. The ramp is a figure here, so at the moment it's only showing 11. Can you see as it's cycling, it's showing 0, 0, 11. So it's currently showing, and that's 11 degrees centigrade. And in terms of ramp, the speed it's going to change temperature at, this is per hour. So like a car's speedometer is in miles per hour, ramp is in per hour. So if I want to tell this kiln to heat up as fast as it possibly can, I would go downwards because I've got my up and down option. I would take it down, oops, too far, to full. And when it says full, that's telling the kiln go as fast as you can, either up or down, and we'll come to how it knows that in a minute. But it's saying for this ramp, for this instruction, go as fast as you can. But what I didn't do is I didn't press OK. So it gave me a little bit of time to press OK. It said, well, you didn't press OK, so obviously you didn't want that. I'll go back to what I was on before. So I'll take it back down to full and press OK, and the kiln knows I want to go as fast as I can. So this is this instruction, which is the 3-part instruction. So the first thing we've done is tell it how fast we want to get somewhere. The next thing we're going to set is what temperature we want it to go to. So in this case, I'm going to set this for arc clay silver, this first instruction. And arc clay silver is a very easy, this is arc clay silver fine silver 999, which is very easy. And I'm going to set this little program and tell it I want it to go up as fast as it can, and I want it to go to 800 degrees centigrade. So I put my finger on the button, press and hold. It starts to go up. The longer you hold it for, the quicker it will start to go up. So it hits a point, there you go, where it starts whizzing up. And then you just need to adjust it back to the actual temperature you want. And again, as soon as you've done that, you press the program button saying, okay, that was right, that's what I wanted. And it goes on to the next instruction. So we've told it to go as fast as it can to 800 degrees centigrade. And now I want to tell it to stay there for, I'm going to tell it to stay there for 45 minutes. So this time we've got our hold time. This is how long, when it gets to that temperature, it's going to stay at that temperature. And I can set this in hours or just in minutes. So at the moment it's on 9 minutes, that's all. So 00 dot, so that's your hours first of all, and then 09 is your minutes. So again, just put my finger on, hold to go up, and take it up to 45. I went one too far, just press the down. Oh, hang on, we'll get there. There we are. 45 minutes. Tell it, okay, that's what I want. Now we are still in program 1. We have set the first instruction to the kiln. And this kiln, as I said before, can take 5 different instructions, 5 segments for each firing program. But this is art clay silver, and I only want to fire my piece at 45 minutes at 800 degrees, and that's it. So now I need to tell the kiln, that's it, I don't want you to do anything else, because it's saying, okay, ramp 2, what would you like me to do next? So I'm going to press it so it goes down to 0. I'm going to get there in a minute, bear with me, there we are. I knew it was in there somewhere. So I've taken it to 0000, and I'm going to press that and say, and 0 says, okay, I don't actually want you to do anything else. That one instruction was all I wanted for that program. That's fine. When you've done that one instruction, you can turn yourself off. The 0s tells it nothing else to do. So it says, okay, I'm ready to start then. And it just sits there saying start, and when I press my button again, it starts firing and it's on. And you know it's on, it flashes up and it shows you this little run button to say, yep, I've got a program, I'm running, I'm doing things, and this will start to go up as it starts to, the elements inside start to heat up. If at any point you want to stop that program, so you can see it's just going from 25 to 26, it starts heating up really quick. You can stop that program if you want to before the end just by pressing stop. It says stop, and it'll still flash and show you the temperature inside the kiln at that point. And then if you press again, it goes back to idle. So it says, okay, I'm not doing any program at the moment, I'm just completely idle, I'm not doing anything, I'm just sitting here. So when you come back to use the kiln again, you switch it on, it's showing idle, and you think, oh, I want to fire another bit of art clay silver. It's in program 1, that's the one I need to use. So you switch it on, you press your button, and it comes up with the program. If you wanted a different number, you'd use your up key to get to a different number to be able to set that. You press OK, program 1, that's what I want. It's not going to just go straight into start each time, because it wants you to check each time before you set it running that you've got the right instructions in there, which is really good, because that means that you're not going to accidentally put it on a wrong program, because so long as you just look as you go through this bit, you're just rechecking the sections. So this is program 1, the firing schedule for art clay silver, and it could have up to 5 instructions in it, but it's only got 1 simple instruction in it. And we're just going to run through that again. So it's showing my ramp is at full. It's going to go as quick as possible to get to the temperature I want. I press OK. The temperature is 800 degrees centigrade because our little light is on, which is what I want. So I say, great, that's fine. I press OK again, and it's going to hold it for me for 45 minutes. That's fine, that's what I want. I say OK again. It says ramp 2, and it's showing all the 0s, which shows that nothing else is to be done because it's all on 0s, nothing. Just think of a line of 0 as meaning to the kiln nothing at all. And then press that again, and it says, great, we're ready to go. I'm ready to go. I'm sitting at start, waiting for you to press that button. don't forget to press that button. You can sit there quite a long time waiting for it to do anything if you forget to press the start button. So you press it once more and off we go. And your little light comes up, it shows you it's running, and off it goes. Normally you would let that just run to the end of the program. On this particular kiln, when it gets to the end of the program, it gives me a nice loud beep to remind me it's got to the end of it. And then at the end of it, it's just going to switch itself off, and then it would just allow itself naturally to go back to cold. I'm just going to stop it from heating any further and press it and switch it off again. And there we are. That's program 1, super simple. Right, so now I'm just going to show you another program just to give you the idea, and this time I'm going to put in 2 instructions. So this is an instruction for Art Clay 950. Art Clay's enriched sterling silver clay at 950. And for this we need to have 2 different instructions in it, because we've got a binder in this that needs to burn out, and this will be the case maybe with a lot of the base metals that you want to fire in, that sort of thing. You'll have to get your firing schedules for any particular clay, and also I do strongly recommend that you fire test pieces whenever you set up your kiln. Otherwise you might find that you can melt things, they don't sinter properly. You always need to test the first time you start firing anything. Okay, so we got to stop. I'm pressing again, it's going to go back to idle, and it's now just sitting at the beginning. I'm going to press again, it's going to go to program 1. I want to leave program 1 as it is. That's my Art Clay 999. That's great, I'm going to leave it at that. So next thing I'm going to do is say, okay, for my Art Clay 950, I'm going to put it into program 2. And for program 2, I'm going to start again. I'm going to say, yes, that's the one I want. Okay. So it says, okay, how quickly do you want to ramp this? Now the instructions for this particular clay are a slow ramp to 500 degrees and hold for 30 minutes for the first instruction as part of that firing schedule. So I'm on full at the moment. They don't actually specify a ramp rate. So it says slow. I could take that really slow, or, you know, it's my choice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to 400. So I'm going to take this up to 400, and remember this ramp, this is the speed the kiln is going to heat up at per hour. Whoop, there we go. And I'm going to say OK. So at 400 an hour, the kiln is going to go up to, if I was going to a target temperature of 800, it would take 2 hours to get there, because it's going to increase at 400 degrees an hour. So to get to 200, it would take, to get to 800, it would take 2 hours. Oh, have I confused you completely now? So, but actually, for this, I want to go to 500, which in actual fact, this is already settled. So this is my temperature that I want to get to hold, and I want it at 500, so that's fine. I could take it up and down, take it back to 500 and pretend, and say OK. So that 500 at 400 an hour, in the first hour the kiln is going to ramp up, is going to go up in temperature to 400 degrees. In the next quarter of an hour, it'll go up 100 degrees because it's going up at 400 an hour. So to get to that 500 should take it about an hour and a quarter. So that's quite a nice slow ramp. And then it's a case of how long do I want it to stay there for. This is the binder burnout on this clay, and the instructions say hold it for 30 minutes, and you can see I'm already sitting on 30 minutes, so let's just change it. So it's now 30 minutes and OK, and it's going to hold for that. Now it says, OK, what do you want to do next? That's your first segment. We've put that in, your first instruction to it. This time we've got a second instruction to put in. So this time we now want to tell the kiln to go up to 870 degrees and to hold there for 60 minutes. So we can go from our 500, we're just leaving our clay in there for this particular clay. It's gone to its 500, it's held there for 30 minutes. Now we'd like it to go full, so it's already on full, as fast as it can, and we want it, so we're going to say okay, that's what we want, and we want it to go up to 870. As you can see, this is already on 870. I should have changed the program on this slightly, just to confuse you. Okay, so I've just set that to 870 and I'm going to say yes, that's what I want. And hold time 1 hour. So this time, instead of just some minutes after the dot, I've got the 1 in front of it showing me that that's an hour. If I put in a bit more, I could have 1 hour and 11 minutes. It's entirely up to you. Whatever you set it for, you tell it okay. Then it says, okay, what would you like me to do next? For this program, we only want to have the 2 segments. So at the end of that, we just want the kiln to turn off, and then we would just leave our clay in here for the kiln to cool down. So we don't want the kiln to do another instruction. We don't want another segment. So we're going to say nothing. We don't want you to do anything else. It's all zeros. That's nothing. So when we press start, the kiln says, great, I've got those 2 instructions all in this program. I'm good to go. Waiting for you. And it's ready to start. And when we press start, it starts, and it starts running. And you can see, just with that little bit of time I've had the kiln on, how the temperature in a kiln goes up really quite quickly. In this particular kiln, it will go from cold at full ramp in less than half an hour up to, it will get to 800 if I tell it to go as fast as it can. And then I'm just going to press stop because I don't want it to run, and I'm going to press it again so it goes back to idle. So it really is quite simple, and I've done a little summary of this in writing as well, just so that you can just print it out and have it by your kiln to remind you. But hopefully that explains it a little bit better, what we mean. So when we're talking about programs, that's a complete firing schedule. When we're talking about segments in that program, they are individual instructions, and each one of those segments, those instructions, is made up of 3 things. It's made up of the ramp, which is how fast do I go up or down in temperature. It's made up of the middle one being what temperature do I go to, and you tell it what temperature you want it to go to. And the third part is how long do I stay there for. Okay, so I'm just going to run through, I've got another program in here. This is actually a program that I use for glass, but I'm just going to run through just explaining that in exactly the same way, this program, so you can see that as well as going up in temperature, we can use those same instructions to the kiln to bring it down. So this is program 8 on my kiln that I've got in, and as I say, this is a glass program that I use actually, but just to show you one more example of how this works. So I'm going to say okay, I want program 8, and this is what I've got in. So for the ramp on this, I've got in 200 degrees per hour for my first ramp. For my first speed going up, it's going to go up at 200 degrees Celsius per hour. It's going to, oops, sorry. So I say okay. It's going to go to 640 degrees Celsius. Okay, and it's going to hold there for 30 minutes. This is my bubble squeeze on a glass thing, a glass firing schedule. Okay, so I'm going to say okay to my 30 minutes. Ramp 2, now it's going to go up at 175 degrees an hour, so really quite slowly, and it's going to go up to 790. So it's going to go from 640 to 790 at 175 an hour. So this schedule takes all day to run. It's a really slow schedule. And when it gets to 790, it's going to hold there for 10 minutes. When it's done that, its next instruction, its next speed is go full, full being as fast as you can, to 482. So it's going back down again. So it's gone up really slowly to 640, then it's gone up again to 790 really slowly. Now I'm saying to it, go as fast as you can back down to 482. So basically it's just going to turn the elements off inside the kiln and naturally cool as quick as it can down to 482. And when it gets there, I want it to hold there for 1 hour, and this actually is the annealing on my glass. And then from there, ramp 4, it's going to go down really slowly, so at 85 degrees an hour, which is very slow, and that is going to go at that speed slowly. So the kiln's going to not allow it to cool as quick as it can. It's going to control it so that it goes down really slowly from 482 to 371, and when it gets to 371, it's only going to hold for 1 minute, because I just want it to go really slowly down in temperature, but I don't need it to hold at that temperature when it gets there. So from that, it goes on to the next instruction, which it can go down much quicker now at 450 degrees an hour. And I'm telling it to go down to 100 degrees centigrade. I could... I don't normally say cold on this particular kiln because it struggles to get down to cold, so I tell it 100 and that's fine, and it's going to go all the way down to that, and again when it gets there it's going to hold for 1 minute. That's my fifth instruction, my fifth segment, and then at that point it's going to turn itself off and be finished. So that's the end of my firing schedule, my 5 instructions. So the kiln is now ready to start. So I hope, let me turn that back to idle. So I hope that that kind of explains the buttons a little bit, what they do and how you can set your own programs, and hopefully makes it a little bit more meaningful. But whatever you do, don't get a new kiln and sit there and don't use it. Please make friends with it, please love it, because it's going to be your best friend.